You were probably expecting the next video to be an update on the Excite Bike project. This will not be that video. That video is coming, but we're gonna take a little detour to get there. A detour on the bike road to Excite Bike, I guess. I want to talk a little bit about game jams and a recent jam that I took part in. So back in January of last year, 2023, I took part in my first game jam. So it was the Global Game Jam. I went to a site here in Tokyo where I make my home, and the theme of the Global Game Jam was roots. So you probably know that game jams generally, maybe not always, but I think generally have a theme, and you're supposed to kind of build your game around whatever the theme is. Perhaps not surprisingly for all of y'all, I worked in Pico-8 and I made a game called Eventual Baristancy, which you can find on itch and I think on GitHub. If I have the GitHub link, I'll put that in the description as well. So roots can be obviously interpreted in a bunch of different ways, and I thought that was like a pretty flexible theme for a jam. I was thankful that that was the theme at my first jam. I took one of the metaphorical approaches for my game, which is to say that the main character in my game is like your stereotypical video game hero dressed as a knight, and he has to return to his roots. There we go. By leaving behind his life of battle and heroism and going back to his hometown to take over his family's coffee shop because his parents are getting old. They need somebody to take over the family business. So he's going back to his roots. All of this is explained in the game's intro. Like I made a little text crawl for the intro bit that explains all this. The setup here is way more elaborate than the game itself. The game is pretty simple. It's just an inversion of a normal action game, where normally in an action game you're going around like hitting dudes. In this game you have to let the dudes hit you, because getting hit will knock your armor off piece by piece, and this is how you move from being a knight to being a barista, which is the goal of the game. Hence the title Eventual Baristancy. I never made a video about that game because at this time last year I was sort of knee-deep in wrapping up Tour, which is one of my other Pico-8 projects, and also starting what would later become Tree Fella. So because I didn't make a video last year, there you go. Eventual Baristancy, playable on itch for like the last 13 months. It's got a cool music track. I like the music I wrote for it. You should go check it out. But this video actually isn't about the 2023 Global Game Jam. It's about the 2024 iteration and the game I made this past January, a few weeks ago, where the theme was, at least I thought, much trickier to work with. So let's go on a very tiny interstellar journey to a place called Spaceport Giggles. Unlike 2023's Roots theme, which I thought was, I don't want to say it was easy to work with, but it's certainly a theme that felt very malleable, at least. 2024's theme was Make Me Laugh. And that is harder, I think, more difficult. Now that I've got some distance between me and that theme, though, and like I've already made the game, so I feel that sense of relief, I could see why it would be an interesting choice for a game jam theme. Like, given a group of development teams that are all working on games, you're much more likely, I think, to see games with a broad variety of mechanics and ideas resulting from that theme. Whether that's because of what I just said, that it kind of maps less easily to our existing vocabulary, or because humor, just by nature, I think is often about, novelty and surprise. And so if you're considering how to make something funny, it's going to drive you in novel directions just by like the definition itself. At the jam site where I was participating, we are given about 48 hours from when the theme is revealed until we have to present our game. So for us, this meant that we found out the theme on a Friday evening and we had until Sunday afternoon-ish to sort of finish up. So Friday night, when we found out the theme and we kind of have a few hours to brainstorm while we're still on site about what kind of game we want to make, for whatever reason, and it may be because of my experience having learned Japanese, I felt like pretty quickly that I wanted to do something that was based around language. And I should be clear that when I say like based around language in inverted commas, I mean that in the loosest possible sense. Like I certainly didn't set out to build like Duolingo in 2 days or anything like that. But given the theme of humor and make me laugh, I thought that struggling to try and make oneself be funny in a foreign language could potentially work as a game, even a small one. But I knew this would have to be pretty abstract. Like I wouldn't have time to build an actual language or anything like that. Again, there's such a limited time. So the tricky part for me was, how do I represent an unknown language to the player and have them be able to figure it out, and then make that whole experience feel kind of gamey? The first idea that I came up with was, I guess, basically a puzzle game. There'd be like an audience. It doesn't really matter how many people, but some kind of audience. And presumably these are aliens and they don't speak your language. You'd have to tell them jokes in this language to make them laugh. Oh, this person doesn't have eyes. Let's give them eyes. They can't laugh without eyes. So each joke would sort of be like several outlined characters on the screen. And then there would be a piece that would sort of appear, say, on the left hand side, like here, I don't know. And it would kind of travel from left to right, you know, with some speed that could gradually increase as the thing got more difficult. And your task would be to look at this piece and look at the sort of empty slots here and rotate the piece, first of all, to be like in the right position. So you can see this piece probably goes for this character here. So you'd have to rotate it so that it would look like this. I don't actually know if that's what the rotation would be like. Let's just go with it. As it was traveling, you would have to rotate each piece, and then when it reached kind of like the part where you needed it to be, which would be here, with a button press, you would kind of, you know, pop it into the right place. And then if you were able to do that for each subsequent piece, like this one would look like this. Obviously, when it gets here, you want it to be rotated, put it there, like that. If you're able to do that for each subsequent piece, you would get the laughs, right? That would be the game. So the language is just some shapes, and you're just mapping these other pieces into those shapes. I hadn't started implementing this yet on Friday night, but when I left the site to go home, this is kind of what was in my brain for what I would start with on Saturday morning. I figured the scope was probably small enough that I could knock it out in the allotted 48-ish hours. But that night, as I thought more about the game and the implementation, I just changed my mind. I think because like that initial idea with this puzzly bit, I still liked it, but it didn't have, it wasn't enough like languagey stuff for me. So like really it's just knowing the shapes, like observing the shapes, and there's some timing element to it. But I started to think more about how I could introduce the action of having to really figure out what a language was, right? Like something that would require less physical timing, like that physical mechanic, and more mental puzzling, if that makes sense. And that's what led me to the idea that I eventually used. I'm going to switch to pink for this part. I thought instead, like, what if you were able to walk around and actually interact with NPCs? So again, these are going to be aliens eventually, but we'll make them not aliens. I mean, maybe aliens could be stick figures, sure. You know, infinite universe, infinite possibilities, right? Anyway, so there'd be these alien NPCs sort of scattered about, and your character, which we'll do in, I don't know, we'll do red for this. Your character, which we'll give some hair to. Yeah. It's a backwards baseball cap. So your character would walk around and sort of talk to these NPCs, and they would talk to you in a very rudimentary language. It was just like a series of characters, right? So, you know, to use like some sort of wingdings, we'd have like, you know, spiral and maybe an hourglass and a star or something like that, whatever, right? And you could then use these example sentences that you gathered by talking to these NPCs to figure out what the grammar was. Like maybe this person over here says, I don't know, like just a square and then hourglass and star, right? So you could kind of use these hints, like collect hints from the NPCs scattered around the world. And that would give you hints as to what the grammar was, because the grammar is like somewhat rule-based. And then you can tell your jokes by creating new sentences that follow what you think the rules of the grammar are. And every valid sentence would be a joke, right? So I recognize, of course, that this means that in this alien culture, every valid sentence is humorous, right? Like everything is a joke. But let's just assume this is a very joyful culture, right? They love humor, right? So if the language is always the same, we run into a bit of a problem, because of course this game is going to be like pretty short, right? Like it's meant to be played in a couple of minutes. And so if our grammar is fixed and it's the same every time, if you play it once, you're going to know exactly what the language is on every subsequent playthrough. So I used some randomness to make sure that each time you played it, there would at least be some reasoning required to figure out what the rules are. Pico-8's built-in font actually has a bunch of sort of like wingding characters in it, and so I chose 6 of those to serve as the characters, like the letters in my alien language. I'm going to draw those now. Okay, so the 6 characters, which I perhaps understandably in some, if not all circumstances, gave names. So I had hourglass, person, ninja star, bees. I think they're actually birds, but bees are cooler. Box. This is supposed to be like it's like 3 lines in a square shape, and then heart, right? And I chose these so that they were relatively easy to identify at a glance as you were kind of scrolling through them and inputting your guesses. And so these were the characters that I decided to use for every iteration. It would be these 6 characters, but they would be randomized somewhat. While I had aspirations as of Friday night on having multiple like sets of grammatical rules, effectively like multiple alien languages, and I even reasoned out what those would be that night, like Friday night, by the time Saturday, like end of day rolled around, I had only implemented one of those sets of rules, like so like one grammar or one language with some randomness because of the time limitation. So the way the grammar ended up working was each time the game is loaded, we select at random or pseudo-random for you pedantic folks out there, 2 of these 6 characters to be our first character. So let's say we randomly select bees and heart, and so that is always going to be our first character. We'll color code this. Okay, and then we take 2 more characters from the remaining characters, again at random. So we'll put person and ninja star, and that'll be our second. And then we take the remaining 2 characters to be our third. So if I wanted to build a valid strings, in our case, we would take one of the first characters. So let's take bees. That's valid. And then our second character, so let's take person. That's like the hardest one to draw. And then third, we can pick hourglass or box. So let's pick box. There you go. So that's a valid string. That one checks out. If we had done, say, for example, like, I don't know, box, person, bees, that does not work, right? That's no good because bees has to come first. Similarly, we could, instead of picking bees for the first character, we could do heart and then person and then box, and that would be valid. In terms of how long the jokes can be, I started by giving the player 6 sort of slots, so they can take a guess that's anywhere from 1 letter to 6 letters and anything in between. Now for this particular grammar, because it goes kind of in chunks of 3, we could do for a valid string, say for example, we take our first one and we do bees, person, and then box, and then we could do the same thing again if we wanted to. We could just do bees, person, box, or you could also like just use the other first character, which is heart. So you could put like a heart here, like that. That's also valid. So that's kind of how the initial grammar is structured. So because each time you start a new game, you might know already, because there's only one grammar, the way the grammar works, but you'll still have to talk to some of the NPCs to figure out like which characters come first, which come second, and which come third. So my thinking in terms of how this would work, like how the player would gather information, is that I just scatter NPCs around the map like this, and then the player would approach one of them, and when they did that, the NPC would speak, like they would give the player a hint, and that hint would again be a valid sentence in our grammar. Once the player had talked to enough NPCs and they felt like they had gotten enough hints, and I realized I forgot to draw legs for this NPC, sorry about that fella, they could choose to start like Showtime mode, and that moves from this setting where you're walking around talking to the characters and gathering hints to one where you're actually trying to input jokes based on your assumptions about the grammar and try to get correct strings, and each correct string that you input gives you some points, and the longer the sequence of characters, so like the longer the joke, the more points you get. So there we go. I feel like that, or I felt like that was the foundation of something. Like I was like, okay, I can work with this. Based on that foundation, this was my first pass at something like an implementation. I hope you like the star field scrolling by there. I added that in about 30 seconds right before I had to present. Anyway, here's our main character, and we can sort of walk around this environment here. My main character has red hair, which caused one of the other jammers to comment that they looked like Celeste, which I think is unavoidable. If you do a Pico-8 character with red hair, you're going to draw that comparison. Anyway, these pink creatures scattered around here are my NPCs, my aliens, and they're how I'm going to acquire hints about whatever the grammar is. So if I just full approach this character down in the bottom right, okay, and they have told me this valid alien sentence is heart and ninja star and then box. Let's go talk to one other one and see if we can get one more hint. Oh, there we go. And then person and ninja star. So you can see there's some randomness involved in how big or how long the hints are as well. So once I feel like I've gathered enough info from these creatures, I can go talk to one more. There we go. So let's say now I've figured out that I have a pretty good guess as to what the grammar is. Once I reach that point, I can just press a button and we'll go to Showtime. So down in the bottom there, there is a text input that I made, so we can like kind of create our little strings here like this. You'll also see in the bottom right, I kind of crammed a little score counter, so I didn't really know where else to put that, and I was in a rush. And I also animated, I guess. I put the main character sprite down near the input box, and they just sort of cycle back and forth to just give it a little bit of pizzazz, I guess. So based on the sample sentences that we got from our aliens a second ago, I know that heart is going to come first, and ninja star is one of the characters that can come second, and the 3-line box is another one that can come third. So hopefully when I do this, the aliens will chuckle, and I should get about 15 points, because I think I set it to be 5 points per character. So we've got a 3-character joke. 3 times 5 is 15. Let's see if they laugh. And there we go. Okay, so the little jiggly haha thing is the success case. And you can see my score has gone up to 15 down on the bottom right there. So you can actually repeat the same joke. So let's put it back in there again. It was heart and ninja star and box. And pay attention here to what happens to my score too. So it's the same joke. The last time I got 15 points, and this time, I just get 1 point, and the aliens did not react as enthusiastically to the joke the second time. So I put it in so it does track which jokes you use, and if you just spam the same joke over and over again, you'll only get 1 point. However, like now that we established that heart comes first, and was it ninja star comes second, and box comes third, we can just do like just heart, and that will give us by itself 5 points. There we go. We could do heart and ninja star, and that should give us 10 points. There we go. Okay, and so on. And we also know that from the examples that I think person was the other first character, like that. So you can sort of start to see how, based on the hints you got from these aliens, you can build up a decent score. You can build up a decent comedy routine, an hour-long Netflix special if you want. It was at this point in the design, though, that I started to think about what kind of choices that I could give to the player. Like, I wanted to give them some kind of risk reward or like a push-pull kind of mechanic. So just to allow the player to have some kind of agency over how each playthrough would go. So I thought to limit the amount of time that the player has for this showtime phase where they're telling jokes, we'll give them 60 seconds to tell as many jokes as they can. It's a 60-second Netflix special, I guess. And they had to tell as many jokes as they can in that time. But during this exploration phase, when you can kind of walk around and get hints from the NPCs, for every hint that you decide to get, let's say I talk to this person here, so we get heart and box. So this is going to reduce the total time that I have for my eventual routine. So from 60 seconds down to 55, 50, 40, etc., etc. Because the goal of the game is to understand the grammar as well as I can, so I can rack up a bunch of points, it sort of behooves me to try to confirm as many of my assumptions about the grammar as I can by talking to these NPCs. But for each additional hint, for each additional NPC that I talk to, I'm going to have less actual time to input my jokes. So I'm sort of forced into a situation to choose between having more certainty about the language versus having more time to score points. Okay, here's the version that includes those changes with the timer. So that pink rectangle up at the top there is the total time that I'll eventually have for showtime. So we can really quickly just pop into showtime and watch it count down so you can see how it's decreasing. And as I approach one of these aliens and speak to them, you'll see that a little bit of time has disappeared from my meter up at the top, along with a really cool no particle effect. Really cool, if I do say so myself. Bang, there you go. To spice it up a little bit. Oh, and also if I talk to the same NPCs over and over again, it doesn't like continually remove time, because that would be pretty mean, right? Like, you can go back and talk to them again. Like, you know. So you notice that each of the NPCs has like hints of different length, or you may have seen that when I was demoing the previous version. Like this one's got a length of 4, whereas this one only has a length of 2. And in order to sort of indicate to the player visually who had the longer hints, I sped up the animation on the aliens with longer hints. So you can say this alien here has a 2-character hint and they're dancing pretty slowly, but this character here is dancing very enthusiastically because they have a longer hint. So this gives the player at least some idea of, you know, if they need a longer hint, they can just go talk to a faster moving alien. So now that I had my main loop and I had a little bit of player choice involved, I added a title screen. Let's do one full playthrough so you can get an idea for what this looks like. Okay, so let's see. We've got our aliens. I want to find one that's moving kind of slow. I think the one on the upper right is moving kind of slowly. Oh, but maybe I want one big hint, and I'm going to build just based on that. So this alien, not person, this alien is moving like super quickly, so they probably have a 4-character hint, right? Yeah, okay. So that's not the best hint. It's like box and person and hourglass and box again. So I have a pretty good idea of how to build strings. So I'm just going to go right into showtime with this and try to build as many jokes as I can just with that one hint. Here we go. Okay, so you can see my time is going to start to count down already. So it was box and then person and hourglass. Let's just start with that bass string. There we go. Okay, and now I'm going to use the components. So I remember it was box and then, whoops, box and person. Okay, so let's build bigger strings. So I can repeat that first 3-character string over and over again. Box, person, hourglass, and then we'll do box, person, oh god, hourglass again. There we go, big points. We could go one smaller. Actually, let's try to figure out what the other first character was. So we know box is one first character, maybe ninja star is the other. Nope. Bees, nope. Heart probably. Yeah. Oh, so right at the end, I was able to figure out that Heart was the other first character in the grammar, but then I ran out of time. So yeah, here is the final sort of game over screen where I give you the score, and also I explain what the grammar solution was. So you can tell what characters were supposed to go in what slots, and that allows the player to confirm their assumptions that they may have made about what the grammar was. And that was the version of the game that I presented at the end of the game jam on Sunday afternoon. It was exactly this. I tagged it. If you want to check out this specific version, you can go to the GitHub, and the release tag is version 0.1. But as I was sort of hinting at earlier in the video, there was quite a bit of stuff that I still had in my brain that I didn't have time to implement in those 2 days. So I went back and I created actually a couple more iterations on this. So let me pull up the most recent version, which is version 0.3, and I'll show you some of the niceties that I've added since the jam happened. Okay, new version. Yeah, so this is the version I released a couple of days ago. You can see right from the jump, we've got some fancy stuff. So yeah, I added a nice color cycling, like, you know, press to start on the attract screen here. Added the byline on the bottom of the version because I had forgotten to do that originally. And let's jump to the game. Here we go. I'm gonna let the sound play here quietly because I actually quite like how the music developed. The first version of the music I wasn't super satisfied with, but this one I think actually kind of rocks, so I'll let you listen to that. You can see a few changes. The play area is a little bit smaller. I moved the time bar over to the left-hand side and added a little icon, so it's supposed to indicate that it's time. I hope that's communicated. And before, like, there was a single button press to go to showtime, but I've changed that to be a hold thing. So you can see if I hold down X, it kind of like builds up and shakes a little bit. I did this because I didn't want to accidentally, or I didn't want to allow the player to accidentally go to showtime, because it's not like a reversible thing. Like once you're there, you're stuck there. And that would suck if you didn't do enough research or you didn't feel ready to go to showtime. So also you might notice there's a couple of like small palette changes on the player character and on the aliens. That was just to kind of make it look a little bit nicer. So let's play around. Let me go talk to one of the enthusiastic creatures here. Okay, so we've got hourglass box bees, hourglass box bees. I also added another new grammar, which doesn't seem to have been selected this time because the grammar selection is also new. But that's all right. I'll leave that one for, that'll be an exercise for the viewer. If you want to go play the game, you can try and figure out what the other grammar is. The other big addition was, you may notice on the bottom, it says, press circle to view notebook. So I just talked to this creature here and they gave me a hint. And if I open my notebook, you can see I've recorded that in the notes so I can reference it later. And any additional aliens that I talk to, their info will also be added to the notebook. So let's go talk to some more aliens. I'm just burning through all my time here. Okay, so now I've talked to all of them. I've gotten all the hints. So now I could theoretically just sit here and try to puzzle out what the grammar is based on the aliens that I've talked to. And this is just a nice little quality of life change that I made because I expect that like people are going to be having to take notes if they do this, like with pencil and paper, or at least with their phone. And so having like being able to view your notes, I thought was like a nice, it was like a friendly thing to do for the player. Okay. So now that the notes are here, I think I've got enough info, and I've actually got all the hints, so I can't possibly get any more info from these characters. So I'm going to hold down X to go to showtime. Bam! Okay, so a few things here. You may have noticed I added a special background with a little stage that the main character stands on. Let me just pause it for a second because I'm going to run out of time. This main character is up on the stage now. I've moved the aliens to be in kind of an audience position. I changed the score. It used to be in the bottom right and it used to just say score. I moved it up top and I changed it to be called Giggles so that it just plays better with the theme of the game. The text input is the same. There is one other big change, which is you can actually view your notebook while you're in showtime mode, right? So you don't have to like plot all your jokes and then frantically input them while the timer ticks down. If you open your notebook, the timer will stop. You can try to figure out what you want to do next, just to make the game like less hostile. I thought that was a nice change. We're running out of time pretty quickly because I talked to all the aliens before I started showtime. So I'm going to try to input one joke. It looks like Person, Heart, and Ninja Star would be a good one to do. So let me just go ahead and put that in there. Person, Heart, and Ninja Star. Like that. Okay, there we go. So we got some jokes. I'm gonna let the timer tick down. The scoring rules are the same as last time. If I tell the same joke again, I'll only get 1 point. And if I... Oh, and there we go. Okay. It ended. Okay, here's the end screen. That ended abruptly. So yeah, again, the only change here was, in addition to some palette changes, that I went from calling it score to calling it giggles. I also cleaned up the grammar explanation a little bit. So rather than it saying first, second, and third, now it says first and fourth, or second and fifth, because again, the strings can be up to 6 characters long. So this is more accurate to say that you could put one of those first characters also in the 4th slot. And the alternative grammar that I implemented has an alternative explanation, which is hopefully sufficient. You can let me know if you give it a try. So that is Spaceport Giggles. That is my Global Game Jam 2024 entry. I hope you enjoyed watching me explain how this came to be and what the heck this thing on my itch page is. Yeah, you can play this on itch right now. The code is on GitHub, links are in the description. If you've never done a game jam before, especially at a physical site, I really recommend it. It's a lot of fun. People are super cool and super welcoming regardless of skill level or specialty or whatever else. If you are at all curious about what it's like to make a game, don't be shy. Like, honestly, I was super shy and super nervous the first time I did it, but I am so happy that I did. I learned an enormous amount, and like I said, definitely keep doing this in the future. So yeah, look forward to future Game Jam videos in future years, as long as I can keep doing this YouTube thing. I have been Eric. This has been Radical Slice. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you all, and I will catch you soon. Bye for now.